And I think that's often what we tend to forget as scientists. We think it's all about being scientists, about the knowledge. But now the more I progress in my career, I just realize, yeah, science is important, but it's much more about life experience, much more about looking at life in a different way, connecting the dots. And what is interesting, despite these so-called failures, what I'm doing now is right at the intersection of all these areas.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Blooming Late Scientist podcast. We've had some amazing guests on so far, and I've loved hearing the journeys of each and every one of you. And I think it's going to be so key for people to hear these stories in science. And I'm super excited today because today we have David Brühlmann on the podcast. And I'm not going to take up your space, David. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and talk about what it is you do.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Martina.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
So I am Swiss. I love mountains. I love chocolate. I love skiing. I'm the stereotypical Swiss, but probably not so much. We'll get into that a bit later. So today I work. I'm a passionate scientist and engineer. I help scientists and engineers master the lab to factory transition in biotech, which is not so easy. A lot of people underestimate how difficult it is to take a molecule into process development and scale up. I help all the scientists out there master this transition and look into the nitty gritty of it so that people can deliver their molecule on time and to their patients.
I mean, that sounds like something that is very much needed in the biotech space. So in what you're doing, like what are the main challenges that you're helping overcome in your day-to-day business?
There are several challenges. One of them is the lack of awareness. Many people, let's say scientists working in the very early space, let's say R&D or in startups, they're so busy with just doing all the testing and bringing the molecule into the clinical studies that they tend to forget that someday, and this day often comes sooner than later, they will have to think about manufacturing the molecule. The other thing is it's simply just a lack of resources or expertise. In particular, scientists working, again, in smaller companies, they just don't have the engineering background, or they don't have access to the right people. And then finally, we're living also in this world now where a lot of people outsource, think about different ways to collaborate, and they want access to the right people at the right time. And yeah, I help them. I help people bring in my expertise and knowledge and critical thinking to that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll obviously talk about your kind of journey to this point, but I would imagine that you would have seen this kind of gap in the market along your journey. Is that what led you to create the business?
Yeah, correct. And interestingly, I saw the gap already while working in corporate biotech. Bigger companies usually have the expertise to navigate that, or let's say they should have the expertise. And yet, leading technology projects myself, I just noticed how difficult that process is. And even in larger companies, people tend to underestimate the difficulty, or they're just not willing to put all the resources to that project to make it successful.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine that's quite a big challenge. I think people listening will hear what you're doing as a business and think, oh, that sounds like something I would want to do. So I guess what we want to hear now is like, where did this all start? Let's go back and talk about like where you started, like your formal education, anything like that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I grew up in Switzerland, and my dream was to become a pilot. So becoming a scientist as I'm today was not my plan. And let's say like this, the path to where I'm today was anything than linear. So yeah, I grew up near the Zurich airport. I was always fascinated by the planes flying over our house, and I wanted to go abroad. And yeah, my dream was to become a pilot. And then later in high school, I was fascinated by biology and chemistry. I was lucky to have great teachers, very passionate teachers, and I found this is what I want to do later in life. And yet, I struggled because it was difficult to know exactly what I wanted to do. I could have done several things: become a pilot, become an engineer, become a scientist. And then this other idea surfaced. I wanted to become a physician because he was popular at that time, and some other friends wanted to become one. It's like, oh, that's a good idea. I want to do that. So that was my conclusion when I finished high school in Switzerland. I started studying. I went to medical school, and it just makes me laugh now. I managed to stay there 2 days. Yes, 2 days. It's not a joke. It's 2 days.
Oh, wow.
And yes, after 2 days, I realized this is not my thing. And I went home, and my parents obviously were extremely shocked. It's like, what's going on? This must be a major crisis. Yes. And then they tried to obviously calm it down and say, well, don't take a hasty decision. Long story short, I took a year to reflect on what I wanted to major in at university. And then I, let's say, fell back to my second best choice at that time, which obviously is now the best choice. I'm looking back now. I studied chemical engineering at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. So I decided to move away from Zurich, where I grew up, to go to the French-speaking part of Switzerland, to Lausanne. And and then I studied chemical engineering. That was the right choice. I really loved it. I became so passionate about the subject. Then towards the end of the studies, I majored in biotechnology, had the opportunity to do my master's project at Serono at that time, which is now part of Merck so Merck, the German Merck. Then I wanted to work in biotech. I finally knew what I wanted to do. But at that time, it was very difficult to get good jobs in Switzerland because the economical situation was a bit more difficult. So I ended up being jobless for a year, which was fun in the beginning, not so fun later into my time of being jobless. Then I found a job at Nespresso in the coffee business, which was a great job. Yeah, it was really a great experience. I had the opportunity to commission packaging line and lines and roasters. And then about a year later, I managed to go into biotech. Worked at Merck in Switzerland. I had the opportunity to work in all kinds of different areas of the business.
Do you know what's quite interesting is, I mean, I don't know if you felt this way at the time, but lots of people that are going through these experiences, like you described when you went to medical school, you would kind of think, oh, I'm a failure. I've failed. I haven't done what I should have done. And it's not until you are able to move forward and look back that you see that all of these experiences kind of lead you to where you really need to be. And of course, whatever you end up doing, they enhance your skill set, right? Because you learn all of these skills and you learn from failure. How do you think your journey would have been shaped had you not experienced all of those things?
I'm very grateful for these so-called failures. At the very moment, when I went home after the 2 days of medical school, I did feel like a failure. But now looking back, I'm so grateful for these experiences because I learned so much, not only about science, and I think that's often what we tend to forget as scientists. We think it's all about being scientists, about the knowledge. But now the more I progress in my career, I just realize, yeah, science is important, but it's much more about life experience, much more about looking at life in a different way, connecting the dots. And what is interesting, despite these so-called failures, what I'm doing now is right at the intersection of all these areas. I'm working in biotech, which is pretty much in the middle of biology, chemistry, and medical school. The three
Mm.
areas where I was interested in high school. So no, it's not a failure. And what it taught me also is there are second chances, third chances, or even fourth chances, and I think it's even good to go through these more difficult moments in life. It helps me a lot now as an entrepreneur, and just to stay the course, and because life as an entrepreneur is not always easy.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. I absolutely agree with you. I think that these experiences teach us, like, if you can look back and see, oh, at the time I thought things were going wrong, but actually it worked out well. When you feel like things are going wrong again in the future, you can kind of tell yourself that. You can say, well, I thought that before and actually things were okay, so it's going to be okay this time. And I think,
Yeah.
like your point actually about the scientists believing that science is the most important part, I relate to that so much because I'm totally with you in that as I've got older, you realize that actually the science knowledge is very much needed, but a smaller part than actually all of the other skills that you have. They are the things that end up making you what you are and your business what it is. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I teach a lot, or I coach a lot of scientists, and I tell them, well, obviously, yes, you need to be expert in your field, but you need to learn to become a good salesperson. You need to be able to communicate well. And I think a lot of scientists underestimate these so-called, I'd say, more life skills, everything else than the scientific knowledge. And if you want to move into entrepreneurship, it's even more. I think, well, it's all about people skills. It's getting along well with people. And now we live in such an international world. We interact with different cultures, different thinking. It's not black and white. Often it's somewhere in the middle, and we think it's black and white, and then we start speaking with somebody from a different continent, and it's totally different. So we have to learn to communicate, and to so it's much more than just the knowledge. It's really much more complex.
Yeah, so important in business, isn't it? Because I mean, I think that often when, like, from my perspective, working in the UK, often you can be blind to the kind of business cultures outside of the UK. And it's very much a learning curve. Like, I remember when I worked for a company that dealt with the DAC region quite a lot. And, like, from a marketing perspective, I had to learn about all of these nuances, particularly in Germany, with marketing and the fact that you're not allowed to cold call people or anything like this. Like, this was all new to me. So I think it's so important, like you say, to have those communication skills now that we're kind of crossing borders, more and more. But let's go back to your kind of path into biotech. So when you made the transition from Nespresso, you said, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Um,
Nespresso, yes.
what prompted you to move from there into biotech at that point?
It was because I was passionate about biotech, and when I finished university, I wanted to find a job in biotech because I was fascinated by the life sciences, and all the possibilities of in that light into the life sciences area. But it was not possible at that stage, so I had to take this detour, which was a good experience. I experienced a totally different business, different challenges. But I knew that one day I wanted to go back into biotech, and then I had this opportunity to do that, and I was really happy about that. And it was a fortunate transition because working for Merck. So I ended up working for Merck for 13 years, and I was able to look at various parts of the business. I worked in engineering. I worked in the quality aspects. Then I moved into tech transfer. So the whole process-related aspect and the project management aspects. And then finally, in the last part, I was in process development. And what was great, this is also to give you hope. At that time, I had this crazy idea to do my PhD. And I think all these previous life experiences gave me the courage to say no to a well-paying job and for a few years go back to science and do my PhD while I was already in my 30s. So yeah, it was a great time. I learned so much, and I was fortunate to be able to work for a company where I was able to to experience again a lot of different parts of the business.
I would imagine actually that someone with your experience would be kind of excel in the PhD environment. I spoke to a guest yesterday who said that doing her PhD later in life meant that she had the ability to say, no, this isn't going to work for me. We need to think about something else, which when you're younger, you don't always have the confidence to say that to somebody. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. By that time, I understood the science and the business much better. So I had a much better understanding of what kind of project could work and what kind of project would make sense. And also, it helped me to organize it in a much more structured way and a more efficient way than I probably would have right after university. Because at that time, I had learned many project management skills, just organizational skills that you usually don't learn in university.
Yeah.
And one
What
more
was
thing,
your
also, I
oh
think it
yeah.
helped me to one more thing. But at that time, I was much more confident and also much more able to communicate with different people. And that's, I had by that time a different mentality, because when you come out of university, you think much more in a solo way. I have to do everything myself. Whereas at that time, I was thinking, okay, who could I call, or who could do this for me? Because I didn't need to do everything myself, even as a PhD student.
That is that's a great point to bring up, because I think this is an issue that lots of PhD students face, where they feel like they have to take on the world and have to cope with everything without any help. And I would agree with you. I think doing the PhD later in life does mean that you're able to ask for help. And I found doing a PhD later in life that I wasn't scared to say, I don't know the answer to that. And people that I worked with who were straight from like college and uni would say, oh, you can't say I don't know, you just have to go and find the answer. And I was like, well, no, I don't know, and it'll be quicker for someone to tell me the answer, right? It's about efficiency as well.
Oh yeah, that's so important. It's and the I think this is a sign of maturity, because we don't have all the answers, and that's fine. That's not an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Just out of interest then, so what was your PhD in? What was the
It was in
subject?
glycobiology. It was in glycobiology, and what we were looking at is how can we tune the glycosylation profiles of MAPs and some more complex molecules like fusion molecules by changing the cell culture environment. So we were looking at different media additives, and also varying the media components itself, just to make the molecules more efficacious and more stable.
Hmm.
And the conclusion was, yes, it's possible. You can tune the functionality of your molecule, if you will, in various ways by just changing the nutrients you're giving to a cell.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. But so doing your PhD, how did that change the rest of your journey onwards?
It changed a lot because I felt that the PhD opened doors, and it helped me again get a better understanding of how science works and how complex projects works. And also, I would say now for what I'm doing as an entrepreneur, the PhD helped me to take my discipline and my consistency to another level, or I'd say endurance to another level. So yeah, the door opener was towards the end of the project. I had the opportunity to take on a team of scientists. That was an exciting journey of my life, leading a group of scientists in technology innovation. This opportunity probably I would not have had if I hadn't done the PhD in that area. And it gave me the opportunity also to speak at conferences and have more exposure, build my network, and now it helped me. It does definitely help me as an entrepreneur now, just to have a broader network, to have access to the right people, to understand how collaboration works, how you should go about writing a paper, and yeah, finally my communication skills also have improved through my PhD.
Yeah, I mean, even the aspect that you just spoke about managing a team, that is such a skill because, you often find that people might have great knowledge and might be great researchers or great scientists, and there's an automatic assumption that they will be good team leaders, but actually that is a completely different skill, isn't it? And managing people is hard. It's a really hard job. So I would imagine that gave you so much in terms of like different skills, particularly with the communication.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Managing people is a totally different skill set. It's a different science. It's also science, but in a
Yeah.
different way. And well, you have to learn it. We're unfortunately not taught to do that in school. There's
No.
very little life skills or relationship skills. And I had to learn it the hard way. I remember even before my PhD, when I was leading a technology transfer project, there was this guy in QC. He would never take my samples, and I did not understand, like, what is the problem? Like, why doesn't he like me? And then one day it hit me that this guy needed structure and order, and I'm much more the freedom type of person and relationship type of person, and he needed the structure. And he was overwhelmed that I would call him at a random time in his busy schedule, giving another sample he had not planned. It's like, oh, I get it. And then I had this talk with him. It's like, I try my best, but trust me, it's a technology transfer project, and there's so many surprises. I cannot do better. And then he understood my side of the coin, and then we found a way to collaborate. And from that day on, it worked fine.
Sometimes that's all it takes, isn't it? Just to have a conversation rather than just assuming things about one another. You can overcome all of these, what seem like huge challenges, and actually they turn out to be not big challenges at all. So while you were kind of on this journey to where you are now, were there any kind of scientific discoveries that really kind of inspired you to end up doing what you're doing now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was already at university. Just the possibility to produce recombinant proteins in cells. For me, this was mind blowing, and I was so much interested into this technology, and I think this was the reason I ended up working in biotechnology. Just this possibility to create to produce antibodies, for instance, or insulin, or these very
Mm.
complex molecules in a living organism. And even before that, in high school, I was when we talked about the structure of DNA, for instance. This I think that's where my curiosity arose. I wanted to learn more about that, and I wanted to work in that space, and I wanted to make a difference in that space.
Yeah, I love that, because sometimes I think there are scientific discoveries that inspire us and we don't always remember what they were because there's so many discoveries every year that sometimes it's hard to kind of figure these things out, isn't it? But they definitely kind of carve your path out, I think, these discoveries. They
Mhm.
have an impact on your long-term goals and things like that. So
Absolutely, yes, yes.
did you have like what was did you have any support and mentorship along the way at any part of your journey? Like how did that help you?
Yeah, absolutely. Mentors, support systems are absolutely key. I would not be the person I am. I would not be where I'm at if I had not have great mentors, great parents, great friends, great systems in place, great values. I mean, there's so many things in life that are so important. So you can call me anything, but don't call me a self-made man, because
I love
that's
that.
not true. I I need mentors, and I am very intentional about having mentors to put myself into mentorship groups, having accountability, and developing systems that allow me to execute every single day in order to reach my objectives.
How do
It's we
you
say that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, and that's so key. So it's so important, and I'm very intentional about having the right people around me.
I really like that. I think that often, I mean, often we can think, oh, I've done this all by myself, I've been really strong. But actually, when you look, you wouldn't have done it alone. It's really difficult to do anything alone. But
Mm.
how do you find the right mentors for you?
It's about doing research to look out what I try to ask myself: who is maybe a year or 2 years ahead of me? And then I try either to put myself into an online mentorship group if I don't have people in my surrounding, or I try to ask my friends or my colleagues or in my network, do you know anyone who could be a good mentor for me? And then it's all about just asking the people and being intentional about it.
Yeah, I think it's like not being afraid to reach out to somebody to ask for help, isn't it? Half the time. And I think most people are happy to help you. That's the experience that I've had. Most
Mm.
people are kind of pleased that you've approached them and said, "Would you be my mentor?" They like that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Most people like it.
mm, it's almost like it's a compliment, isn't it? If somebody comes to you and says, "Can you help me on this journey?"
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely a compliment, and I love when people reach out to me. I love helping other people.
Mm, yeah. What a So I guess my final question to you is, what advice would you give to someone who is, thinking about, maybe going back to do a PhD later in life, but they're concerned that they won't be able to cope, and they're just worried in general? What advice would you give to them?
Number one, have the courage to walk the uncommon path. I think in the Western society, probably also in the Asian society, we're so much focused on doing what everybody else does. Um, yeah, I give you the freedom to do something else and try and fail. And if it's a failure, look at it as a learning. It's not a failure. Um, Number two, I would say be useful. do whatever is serving other people. I think that's a great way to, whether you're in academia, whether you're still in your studies, or whether you're an entrepreneur, be useful, help other people, make a difference. And then finally, be curious, learn, just keep learning, keep asking questions. And what we've alluded to before, don't be afraid of not knowing, just ask.
Yeah, that's such a great note to end on. And actually, I told a little lie, because I have one more question for you, because you mentioned that you love chocolate. So, of course, I want to know what your favourite chocolate is before we finish.
Yeah, that's a good question. My favorite chocolate is obviously Swiss chocolate.
Of course.
It's a brand. I'm not sure whether you will find it internationally. Unfortunately, you might find it as the brand. It's called Frey. If you live in Switzerland, you find it in every supermarket called Migros. That's my favorite chocolate. It's in the supermarket, but it's such good chocolate. So get some Frey chocolate.
Yeah, I am. After this call, I'm going to go online and see if I can order some. David, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure having you on here. Before we go, where can people find out more about you and your business?
Yeah, go over to smartbiotechscientist.com. That's where you find all the link to my podcast. And you will also find the link to my consultancy business. So it's smartbiotechscientist.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. I know it's going to be so helpful for other people to hear about your journey. And to everyone else listening, thank you again for joining, and we'll see you again next week with another Blooming Late Scientist. Thank you.